Alright, so this is week 2. I know some of you are feeling a little overwhelmed with the material for pre-calculus in addition to all of the material from your other classes. Hopefully you guys have kind of gotten into a groove of what the next couple weeks will look like for you and can kind of balance all of that. So for this week for pre-calc, just as we're kind of adjusting to everything online, our first video is going to be a review of some of the homework problems that you guys had last week, and then you'll get new material on Wednesday. So this will not happen every week, but just wanted to make sure that we're all kind of at the same place, understanding the content before we start to move on, especially as we're all kind of adjusting to a new way of learning right now. Remember that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I am having Google Hangout sessions. This week I might only have one in the afternoon because there weren't a lot of people last week that logged on to that. But if you have any specific questions, that's a great time to log on and ask those questions. If not, feel free to email me. You have tons of resources like Khan Academy that will also help you if you need just some extra clarification. So solving systems with 3 equations, that's what we're going to review. I know that you had equations or systems with 2 equations, but those ones should be a review from Algebra 2. So we're going to actually move on to just looking at the homework problems that involved 3 equations. I'm not going to do all of them, but there were 3 on the math resource worksheet that just have the answers for you on the answer key, so I want to walk you through kind of the steps for those as well. So the first one we're looking at is number 2 from the math resource worksheet. Okay, here's your equation. We want to, first step, you want to use that graphic organizer to help you, that's fine as well. You want to combine all 3 of these equations into 2 equations, and you only want 2 variables left. They have to be the same 2 variables. So you can really pick whatever ones that you want. I'm going to pick a z. That's going to be the variable that I'm getting rid of. Okay, I'm just going to label these A, B, and C so that I know. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add A and C together because that will cancel out my Z value. So that gives me 4x plus 6y equals 8. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take B. So that has a 4 in front of the Z. So I need I'm adding it to 4 times C. So I need to make sure that whatever number comes in front of this Z is opposite of the number in front of whatever equation I'm adding it to. So B and C we're adding together, but I need to multiply C by 4. So when I do that, I'm just going to rewrite these first before I add them. So multiplied by 4, I have 12x, 16y, okay, so that should be your new 2 equations that you're adding. Gives you 14x plus 15y equals 16. All right, now your next step is you have these 2 equations with 2 variables. And you want to solve for one of the variables. So as I look at these 2 equations, there's not a very specific variable that I should get rid of. Okay, so there's not a variable that has a 1 in front of it, and there's not a variable that's a multiple of another one of them. So what I'm noticing is that 6 and 15, I can multiply those 2 numbers by something in order to get to 30. Okay, so that's what I'm going to actually pick. I'm going to multiply those 2 equations by whatever I need to get in order to get the number in front of y to be 30. So that's going to make this first equation, I'm multiplying it by 5. Okay, so 1 will be a positive 30, and then I'm going to multiply this one here by negative 2. So my new equation becomes 20x plus 30y equals 40 minus 28x minus 30y equals negative 32. Okay, so I got my 30s to match up. I'm going to add those together. So negative 8x, y's cancel out, equals 8. Divide both sides by negative 8. X equals negative 1. Okay, we could have done that a couple different ways to get x by itself. This is just the way that I picked. It probably would have been easier without having to multiply both equations by a number, but that's totally possible that you can do that as well. So this here would be step 1, 2, 3 if you're following along with your graphic organizer. Step 4 is we're plugging in this variable for x back into one of our equations in the boxes for 2. I'm just going to plug it into the first one, and I'm going to solve for y. Alright, there's my second value then. So now that I have two variables, I'm going to plug both of those variables back into one of my equations in step number 1. Again, I'm going to just choose the first one. So negative 1 plus 2 times 2 plus z equals 6. And then solve for z. So then your solution is going to be negative 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's number 2. We're going to move on now to number 3. Alright, so number 3 from that same worksheet, we're going to go ahead and solve this system. I'm going to focus on my y values. Okay, you could have picked x as well, it doesn't really matter. Z probably would have been a little bit more challenging. So first equation I'm going to do is a plus b, because that will cancel my y's out right away. Then I'm going to do 2 times b plus c. That'll get negative 4y, so that'll cancel it out as well. So I'm just going to rewrite those first when I multiply the first one by 2. Okay, so I rewrote that first equation, that's 2 times b. Then my second equation is just c, add those together. Now you have two equations. Now we need to take those two equations and I need to solve for one of my variables. Again, like our last problem, none of these are really easy, so I'm going to have to actually multiply both equations by a number. I'm going to choose to get rid of the x values first, so I'm going to multiply this first equation by a positive 5, and the second equation by negative 2. Okay, so I multiplied each of those by the respective numbers, rewrote them. Now I'm going to add them together. Negative 12z equals positive 12. Solve for z. Z equals negative 1. So now I need to plug that into one of my equations for step number 2. I'm going to plug that into my very first equation. I'm going to solve then for x. So then I get x equals 5. And now plug both of those values into one of your equations from step number 1. Okay, so I plugged x equals 5 and z equals negative 1 into my first equation. Notice that I'm subtracting the value of z, so that needs to be subtracting a negative 1. Don't forget about that. When you then solve for y, you should get a positive 1/2. So your solution is 5, 1/2, negative 1.